Okay, colleagues, so let's continue our work. As we had agreed before the break, we will continue our exploration of regional activities in support of the early warning for all and the identification of gaps as applicable to the space community. So let's continue with Regional Association 3 and 4. And Diego, you have the floor, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Diego Souza from ENPE, the Brazilian National Institute for Space Research, and I'm focal point on satellite data requirements for Regional Association 3. And I would like to acknowledge my colleague, Marcial Garbanzo from the University of Costa Rica, who is the focal point for RA4, who also greatly contributed to this gap analysis, and also thanks Zoya for her great support. And through the coordination group on satellite data requirements for RA3 and RA4, which is our regional counterpart to RADAG and ETSAT in the Americas, we distributed last year these WMO RA3 and RA4 early warnings for all survey on the use of satellite data to monitor weather hazards. And we received 61 responses from 29 countries. And in the survey, respondents were asked to identify the top 5 hazards affecting their countries and answer 5 questions for each hazard identified, as we will see. And these are the hazards identified, ranked from the most to the least frequently mentioned. And this graph shows the aggregated results across all responses. And the top hazards are thunderstorms, floods, tropical cyclones, fires, lightning, drought, and wet spells, which is consistent with the hazards identified by the WMO rapid assessment, as mentioned by Agnes and Sarah, as well as with previous studies conducted by other regional initiatives, as you can see in our backup slides. And beyond identifying the top hazards, one of the objectives was to assess how successful our regional community has been in monitoring these hazards using satellite information. And as we can see here, when aggregating all hazards mentioned by all respondents, this is the overall level of success across RA3 and RA4. 31% reported being very successful, 49% moderately successful, and 20% with limited success. So this means that nearly 70% of our regional community face some challenges when using satellite data for monitoring hazards. But it's also important to understand that this graph represents the aggregate across all hazards. And as we will see later, the very successful feedback drops significantly depending on the specific hazard, as we are going to see. Okay, now let's take a closer look at what the issues are. First of all, most of the community reported inadequacies in the data, meaning that either the spatial or temporal resolutions or the data latencies are not optimal for their monitoring needs. And another major issue reported was the lack of training. And that's really, really interesting because, you know, since our region began preparing for GOES-R and JPSS, training has been a major focus. And at the regional level, the number of training activities has increased exponentially. For example, NOAA has organized 2 international satellite workshops per year in many countries consistently over several years. And also our virtual laboratories, centers of excellence, have held many training events, and yet the community still reports a lack of training. And we are going to see why on the next slide. And also the lack of appropriate processing and visualization software, as also mentioned by Agnes, was identified as another issue, followed by difficulties in managing large volumes of data, especially since the transition to the current generation of satellites, which provide much more spectral bands, higher resolution, and additional instruments. Okay, so training remains a major issue, and here's the reason. This graph shows that while most of the community reported that basic training has been completed and is well established, we received 128 responses indicating that the need for more advanced capacity building activities. So this shows a demand for more in-depth hazard-specific training that goes beyond the basics. And addressing this is one of our key recommendations for a regional action plan, um, including the organization of test beds, focus on specific satellite products, and the implementation of hazard-specific training events. And apart from inadequacies of the data and lack of more advanced training, visualization and IT-related issues also present significant challenges for our community. Let's take a closer look. We had a question: what challenges do you have in visualizing satellite data? And first, the community reported insufficient computing power to display multiple data sets, which is linked to the increasing volume of data. Then the inability to overlay NWP outputs onto satellite data, the inability to combine satellite data with in situ observations, the inability to overlay different types of satellite data, and the limited ability to zoom into specific areas of interest, among others. So in summary, insufficient computing power and difficulties and integrating different data sources are the major challenges here. And with such a diverse community, it is very difficult to address all these problems related to IT that are very, very specific. And since each regional NMHS uses different software and different data access and different processing solutions, and the international community, our coordination group focus in strengthening community connections through social media. Because it is very difficult to address all these issues through conventional training alone. And from our experience, it is much easier if the community provides support to itself informally through these thematic groups. So apart from addressing these technological aspects on trainings, another recommendation is to keep improving this informal interaction. And also, as we have seen, many challenges and gaps are similar across different regional associations. For example, here, my colleague Marcial, which is the other co-chair of the group, had the opportunity to attend the joint RE2 and RE5 satellite coordination meeting last year. And looking at his notes, the issues presented by members are essentially the same as RE3 and RE4, including latency issues, bandwidth, computing power, storage, training, and so on. And also based on the presentations from Agnes and Sarah today, issues such as the need for higher temporal and spatial resolutions, underutilization of existing products, and lack of training activities were also highlighted. So another recommendation that I think it's viable is to work towards inter-regional collaboration in the future, combining our efforts whenever it's possible to address some of these common gaps. Another important issue identified is related to rapid scans, as according to the survey, the procedure to request regional coverage of the GOES-R mesoscale domain sectors is still relatively unknown among the RA3 and RA4 community, and also some of those who are aware of the procedure reported that they lack the visualization tools to display imagery with such high temporal resolution, which ties back to the IT-related challenges. So informing members on how to request the mesoscale coverage is another recommendation, especially since the procedure is not complicated, as we have requested a number of times in Brazil, Argentina, and Costa Rica, for example, with a very good approval rate from NOAA, as they have their own priorities. Okay, so these were the general results based on aggregated answers across all hazards, but we also conducted a hazard-specific analysis focusing on the top hazards identified by the community. And we have many slides covering these hazard-specific results, and we won't show everything here as we do not have the time, but just to give you an idea, let me just share an example for a single hazard like floods in this example. And for each hazard, we've created a map showing which countries considered it their first, second, third, fourth, or fifth priority hazard. And apart from this mapping, another important information gathered from this survey is which satellite products the community is actually using to monitor this particular hazard, which ABI bands, which RGB composites, and which derived products are actually being used by our regional community. And using this information combined with the recommendations from the setups as indicated in the WMO data call from 2023, we can draw some valuable insights. Like in this example where NOAA recommends the NOAA flood mapping products, which are derived from ABI, VIRS, AHI, and SAR data. And these are excellent products. We have used those many times in Brazil. They are easily accessible, both for online visualization and for local data processing. But among all the 61 answers from many countries, this specific product has been mentioned by the community only once. So although NOAA has recommended this product on many training events, users may still expect more in-depth, hands-on training opportunities, such as advanced courses, case studies, and test beds, for example. And when we look at the level of success for this particular hazard, like in this example, it is not the 30% from the aggregated results, but much lower, as we have only 7% of respondents in RA3 and RA4 reporting being very successful in using satellite data to monitor floods, meaning that over 90% of our community are facing some kind of issue. Again, probably related to lack of more advanced training and standard procedures. On the other hand, the specific issues for floods in this example are very similar to the aggregated results, with data inadequacies, lack of training, and problems with software and visualization. And also the current level of training in accessing and interpreting satellite data for monitoring floods follows the same trend of the aggregated results, with the vast majority of respondents reporting that basic training is completed and advanced training is needed. And for each top hazard, we present some outcomes listing the key challenges identified, such as the need for advanced training, etc. And we also provide some insights, including which products are mostly widely used, which products have limited awareness, which are underutilized, and some recommendations and key takeaways, like in this example, providing training on specific products to improve awareness and adoption, developing practical exercises, and developing advanced training on end-to-end flood event monitoring in this case. And we have conducted the same detailed analysis for all the other top hazards on the list, and the results are available in the backup slides for your reference that are already uploaded to the CM-16 webpage. So as general outcomes, we have that this is a work in progress diagnostic, as we are working in a concrete regional implementation plan that turns the identified gaps into activities and timelines. Advanced products exist, but many are underused, and we should work on community awareness. Many of the challenges are related to data processing and visualization. And to address this, we need not only to improve data feeds, but also provide ready-to-use tools and practical examples. And basic training is widespread. What is missing is more advanced applied training, showing scripts, data handling, practical cases that users can adapt to their own contexts. Like Natalia mentioned earlier, practical labs focused on day-to-day operations. Also, we need to better promote how to request regional coverage of mesoscale sectors, as this option seems underutilized and not widely known. And more advanced virtual training sessions highlighting the full range of satellite products for specific hazards could be highly beneficial. And I have one action here to promote among our regional community this early warning for all satellite products dashboard, which is great. And also to ensure that more members can benefit from these wide range of products, the region could, in my view, through dedicated task teams, develop solutions in close collaboration with the community. We're starting with basic scripts to process some products, progressing to more advanced setups that provide regular data flows and progress to fully operational systems. And finally, we recommend creating and sharing hazard-based, short, standard operational procedure to guide users that would provide quick instructions on the most useful satellite products, including how to access, interpret, and apply them. Another possible action, now that we have a clearer picture of which countries are most proficient in using satellite data for specific hazards, is to organize workshops where members can present their procedures and best practices, focusing on a member-to-member knowledge transfer. And we have already done something similar in 2024 with our regional colleagues presenting case studies and the satellite products used for monitoring hazards. And we are thinking on expanding this initiative, as in our point of view, this is the most efficient way to improve our capacities as a community. And also, we will soon publish the survey results using Microsoft Sway, which provides a more user-friendly and engaging format. And this report will be shared with regional experts for additional review. And since we have already shared these slides with the community during our regional meetings, we are already receiving feedback from subject matter experts, like in this example from William Straka from SIMS, which is one of our POCs for floods, noting that the survey provided valuable insights and mentioned that the team is willing to collaborate on developing regional training courses, of course, depending on funding availability, which is itself a capacity gap. And also mentioning that they are open to provide reference materials related to these hazards. And another important action we have been working is engagement with other Earth observation and training initiatives such as AmeriGeo, NASA ARSAT, and others, as we share some common challenges and there is a strong potential to benefit from mutual exchange and collaboration. And for example, we presented this analysis at the AmeriGeo Coordination Group meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it generated significant interest from these initiatives, including opportunities for collaboration. And here we have another nice example of how such engagement helps us reach a broader feedback. In this case, from EOTech DevNet, which is a global network promoting the use of satellite-derived information. And they kindly share the results of our survey on their social media channels, inviting the community to share ideas on how to close these gaps. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, Diego.